Hello, good evening, and thank you for being with us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on News Nation. In just moments, we'll be live with former Vice President Mike Pence, side by side with President Trump for years, his assessment tonight on what Vladimir Putin might do next and what the commander-in-chief needs to do next as well. The former VP here is his old running mate, makes a new move in Washington. Why the president just moments ago met with the National Guard.
You got to be strong, you got to be tough, you got to do your job. Whatever it takes to do your job, you got to do your job. But the crime numbers are way down.
9, 8, 7, 6, stand by.
Vice President JD Vance with Georgia on his mind. Once again, out on the road. He was put out on the road to tout the president's key legislative law. So how are Democrats going to push back against all this? One of their top governors live with us tonight as well. And I guess you could say it was Trump versus Letitia James. The latest twist as a court makes a $500 million ruling, with the president tonight claiming victory. But first tonight, here from the Hill, the president before the National Guard. This just moments ago, speaking to hundreds in Southeast D.C. as he touts a crime crackdown right here in the nation's capital. It also comes as the commander-in-chief tries to game plan his next move overseas, how to get Putin and Zelensky to the table together. Vice President Mike Pence tonight with us here on the Hill in moments. But first, our Robert Sherman in Ukraine, our Joe Khalil in Southeast D.C. on what is before the president this evening. Joe K., I'll start with you because you were there. We just saw the president. He talked earlier today about a patrol. I don't think that came about, but nonetheless, an image there with the president of the United States and the National Guard.
Yeah, so he's not going to be out and about, that's clear. But he did sort of have this moment where he was able to address not just the National Guard, but local D.C. Metro Police and all of the federal police agencies that are a part of this federalization plan, all in one place. And it was sort of an encouraging message from him. He covered a lot of ground. You can see here, again, all in one place, because you see the National Guard there. You see the presence of several of those agencies. Take a listen to what President Trump said just moments ago here.
We're not playing games. We're going to make it safe. And we're going to then go on to other places. But we're going to stay here for a while. We want to make this absolutely perfect. It's our capital. And I guess it used to be many years ago safe, but it's certainly not had a very good run. And you got to be strong. You got to be tough. You got to do your job, whatever it takes to do your job.
So face-to-face, Blake, with those who are on the ground doing this federalization plan. What I thought was interesting is for the first time since this D.C. takeover began, we heard President Trump talk about this operation, not just in terms of arrests and homeless encampments. He went much broader. He talked about a larger beautification of the nation's capital. Infrastructure, he talked about replacing signs that are old and decrepit. He talked about the fields in D.C. needing to be replanted. He said all of that's going to happen. And he ended sort of by saying to all the law enforcement there, you take care of the safety and the crime. I will take care of beautifying D.C. And he gave a timeline. He said by the end of this year, we should start to see that. So I thought that was very interesting. And again, at least since this takeover began, we haven't heard in terms like that, this operation described that way.
Our Joe Khalil live tonight in Washington. Joe, thank you. Also on the White House's agenda, a possible meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and the commander-in-chief. But will that meeting actually happen? The president today writing, quote, "It is very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but is not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning. It is like that with Ukraine and Russia." It comes as Russia launches a major attack on western Ukraine overnight, with no sign of that coming to an end anytime soon. You see the images there. Our man in the middle of it all, Robert Sherman, once again live for us tonight in Ukraine. Robert?
Hey there, Blake. Well, if all of this talk of diplomacy and peace is supposed to put us on a trajectory towards a cooling of tensions here in Ukraine, you are not seeing it on the ground. In fact, what we witnessed here overnight, by all accounts here, a massive strike carried out by Russia, not just in terms of the number of munitions that were put in the air, 570 plus drones, 40 missiles, but also the wide spanning damage that you're looking at this morning. not just in the Donbass, not just in the east, but places like Lviv in western Ukraine. That's where someone was killed overnight here. And as all of this diplomacy is taking place, when you dive into the numbers here, we'll go back to August 15th, for example, and compare that through August 20th. August 15th, that was the date that President Putin and President Trump sat down. They met in Alaska. In this span, over 30 people killed, more than 140 injured. President Zelensky saying in his evening address tonight, he has no confidence that Russia is looking to move towards peace and believes they're trying to sidestep any talks. Take a listen.
The signals coming from Russia are simply outrageous. They are trying to wiggle their way out of holding a meeting. They don't want to end this war. They continue their massive attacks on Ukraine and their ferocious assaults along the front line.
So the White House says that they would like to see a bilateral between Russia and Ukraine within 2 weeks. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was asked about this today. He said that's possible, but they're not ready to commit to anything yet. Not until there's more talks, not until there's more negotiations. So at this hour, nothing is on the calendar or confirmed. Blake?
And on it goes, our Robert Sherman live tonight in Ukraine. Robert, thank you. With us now tonight, here on the Hill, former Vice President Mike Pence, of course, the Vice President for Donald Trump in his first term. Thank you for being with us tonight here on set in Washington with us on the Hill. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Let me start with the events there in Eastern Europe. You've met with Putin. You know what it's like to be in a room with Putin. We've seen this sort of cadence over the last week, which is Trump meeting with Putin, Trump meeting with Zelensky, the European meeting, and now trying to get it into a Putin-Zelensky one-on-one, and then the three of them together. What is your assessment tonight, Vice President, of where all of this stands?
Well, first, I want to commend President Trump for continuing to engage in the peace process. I mean, the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. And the fact that the president, despite some pressure from some voices in and around the administration that would have cut Ukraine off months ago, the president has stayed on it. He is seeking peace, meeting with President Putin and meeting with President Zelensky and our European allies, I thought, represented measurable progress. But I really believe, having met Vladimir Putin, that at the end of the day, Putin only understands strength. And I think the time has come for the United States Senate to pass those harsh secondary sanctions on Russia, put them on the president's desk, let the president sign them into law. The law permits him to waive them and hold them. But unless we make it clear to Vladimir Putin that there will be, as the president pledged a week ago, severe consequences to his country and his economy unless he embraces this process toward peace, I'm very skeptical that we'll make any progress at all. Blake, look, I really do believe at his core, Putin doesn't want peace. He wants Ukraine. And Putin will not be stopped until he is stopped. And giving the president that Senate bill, giving him those secondary sanctions, even while he continues to vigorously pursue the diplomatic course, I think is the most certain pathway toward a peaceful and a lasting conclusion.
So you say Putin only knows strength. The president today posted this image on social media, obviously on the bottom here, the Khrushchev-Nixon moment of pointing the finger, and the president today basically showing the same image with him and Vladimir Putin. There was a hot mic moment the other day in which the president said that he thinks Putin wants to get a deal for him. Do you believe that to be the case, and do you think that the president is being tough enough on Putin?
Well, I really do believe the president's recent decisions to renew military support to Ukraine was vitally important. And look, I served alongside President Trump for 4.5 years. We had a close working relationship. I know how he deals with heads of state, including adversarial heads of state. It's the gentle hand, the velvet glove. But one of the reasons I believe why Russia never entered Ukraine during our 4 years of our administration is because we also had the credible threat of the use of force. He saw us take action, unleashing our military to take down the ISIS caliphate, send cruise missiles into Syria to take down Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard leader. All of that, I think, made it clear to Putin that the United States under the Trump-Pence administration meant business. I think that in the wake of the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan with Joe Biden, that credible threat of force, the credible strength of the United States on the world stage was deeply eroded. The president has the opportunity to claim that back. I really do believe the strike in Iran was necessary and should be commended by the president, and I commended him for it. But at the end of the day, look, President Trump, I know him well. He's fully capable of doing the diplomatic thing and being friendly and shaking hands, and at the same time saying, here's the economic consequences that are going to happen unless you step forward. If we pass those secondary sanctions, Vladimir Putin will understand that we could literally break their economy. And by providing continued military support for Ukraine, that combination of efforts, I think, is the best pathway to peace.
Let me show you some of the video, which I think you saw walking in here, which was the president down the road, Southeast D.C. today. He was speaking to the National Guard, spoke to them for, I don't know, about 10, 15 minutes or so. I know that you believe that he's doing the right thing here in Washington, D.C. The president today suggested that more is on the way maybe to other cities. He's in the past, for example, name-checked New York, Los Angeles, Oakland, Baltimore. Do you think, sir, that it would be wise for him to expand beyond Washington, D.C.?
Well, first, I do, Blake, thank you for noting. I strongly support the president's action here in our nation's capital. I mean, people that want to minimize the crime rate and say it's at some 20-year low fail to recognize that if Washington, D.C. was a state, it would have the highest homicide rate in the country. 1,600 violent crimes in this relatively small area of the nation's capital is utterly unacceptable. And so I commend the president for using authority he has under the Home Rule Act to essentially federalize the local police force. I'm grateful that the mayor's been cooperative in that regard, deploying the National Guard. With regard to other cities, I think the American people would be grateful to see the president provide the resources to state and local law enforcement, and where necessary, as he did in Los Angeles, to be willing to deploy the National Guard to backstop that effort. There's probably no higher priority than ensuring the safety of our families, our communities, and law and order, and I support the president's efforts.
You have been a champion for conservatives and conservatism over the last couple decades, whether it be as a radio host, a congressman, or a vice president, obviously. I'm curious of a couple of your thoughts here. If we could show the picture. The president, the White House, one of the communications aides posted this today, which is, you and I both know this, but when you walk through the White House, there's all these, beautiful pictures of whatever administration is there at the time. And this is an image, the tariff men, now hanging in the White House. The president there, Abraham Lincoln, you can see other past presidents. What's your reaction to that hanging in the White House in a Republican administration?
Well, I'm somebody that believes in less government and less taxes. And tariffs are taxes. I mean, American businesses and American consumers pay American tariffs. And I must tell you, the fact that the administration put out a panel yesterday boasting of the fact that they'd collected $150 billion more in taxes than this period of time during the Biden administration was quite striking to me, because those taxes, those tariffs are coming from the American people. And I think at the end of the day, they're going to show up in our economy and have negative effects. Now, that painting's not wrong, but everyone around the president there was a protectionist. Every one of those people was president before we had an income tax. And the reality is, that was a time when we financed our entire government based on tariffs and duties. And now we finance our government by individual and business taxes, a very small amount from tariffs. And I think at the end of the day, the American people are more and more understanding that that it's our companies, it's our businesses that are paying the tariffs. And so my line is two things. Number one, be as tough as you can possibly be on China. Our administration changed the national consensus on China. The president imposed $250 billion in tariffs on China. They ended up coming to the table and negotiating with us. After years of trade abuses by China and intellectual property theft, we can't be too tough on them. But with I always say, free trade, free nations.
Let me leave you with this. There was another image today, and it was Vice President Vance with the American flag behind him. He's out there selling the one big beautiful bill. President Trump said earlier this month when he was asked who's the heir to MAGA, he said Vance, most likely, after all, he is the vice president. I think Marco is also somebody that maybe would get together with JD in some form. As you think about conservatism and conservative politics going forward, how do you view possibly JD Vance and Marco Rubio as heirs of those of the movement?
Well, for me, I'm focusing more at this time in my life not on who will be next, but what will be next in the Republican Party. Look, I was a Democrat as a young man. I joined the Republican Party because of Ronald Reagan, because of a commitment to a strong national defense, American leadership in the world, less government, less taxes, traditional moral values, and the right to life. Those are the policies and values that defined our party for the last 50 years. And I believe they're the best pathway forward for America and for Republican prosperity. And so for me and for my folks, we're going to be looking to who that man or woman is who's going to best articulate and carry forward that conservative agenda, and we'll let the future take care of itself.
We'll leave it there. Vice President Mike Pence, again, appreciate the time, sir. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Blake.
Here on the Hill. All right, still to come tonight. Other side of the break, lots more. Overruled. An appeals court tosses out a roughly $500 million penalty against President Trump. So what are the next steps for the president and the New York Attorney General Letitia James? Our Jesse Weber joins me to break it down on the other side, plus this.
Because if you're working hard, the government ought to leave you alone. Ain't that the truth?
Vice President Vance today in the Peach State touting the big, beautiful bill. Does he have more than just Georgia on his mind? I thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. I'll be back on the other side of the break in 4 minutes. All right, welcome back. A major legal victory today for President Trump as an appeals court throws out a, give or take, $500 million fine. He was ordered to pay that amount in a New York civil fraud trial led by the New York Attorney General Letitia James. The judge is calling it unconstitutional and excessive. The president responding earlier today, claiming the decision was a quote-unquote total victory. With me now, Bill McGinley, former White House cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration, and Jesse Weber, News Nation legal contributor. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here. All right, Jesse, this was obviously a story, and Bill, that we covered for quite some time. I wonder, Bill, since you know Trump well, I'll start with you. Where do you think he goes from here?
I think they're going to appeal the underlying verdict. They want to remove the injunctions regarding the business limitations that they can engage in New York. And I think that this is a total victory for President Trump. I think it also demonstrates that this really was about the weaponization of the justice system against him. This is the case where the judge said that Mar-a-Lago was worth about $18 million, which nobody bought. And I think that DOJ investigation gets another puff of wind in the sails to take a closer look at this, because I think that there are some serious and troubling questions about how this case was conducted.
So Letitia James responding today, Jesse, it should not be lost to history. Yet another court has ruled that the president violated the law and that our case has merit. That's her say on all of this. Where does she go from here?
She's trying to find a win in a day where she really lost. Why do I say that?
Okay.
Because let me explain something. Not only were all the judges pretty unanimous that this fine was incredibly excessive, there was a big split. You had one judge who said this whole case should be thrown out, that she didn't even have the legal authority to move forward with it. Two of the judges said there should be a retrial. And there was commentary in the opinion today that her public comments, which you and I have talked about before, about Donald Trump, were problematic. So now this goes to the Court of Appeals. She's obviously going to appeal it. 7 judges there. What's the likelihood that they're going to side with this appellate court? Maybe pretty strong. So it's a good day for Donald Trump. Obviously, it's not a full victory because he was still determined to be liable for fraud. But with this judgment being thrown out, it's a massive win for him.
And again, we're talking about here somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million by the time you add it all up. Wow. Jesse Weber, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Bill McGinley back with me later in the show. Thanks, guys. Still much more ahead tonight. Here on the Hill, the vice president makes a pit stop in the Peach State. How he's already rallying the Republicans. Is this what he's doing for the midterms? Welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. Just about 6:30 here on the dot in our nation's capital. Top right of the screen there, a live look at the southeast part of Washington, D.C., or this just happened moments ago. President Trump with members of the National Guard as his crackdown on D.C. crime continues. And on the bottom right, the Vice President, JD Vance, earlier today in the city of Atlanta to tout the One Big Beautiful Bill. But there was opposition to the Trump administration's agenda in several different ways. We'll speak to a key Democratic governor in a moment, but first to our Kelly Meyer, who has the very latest on the messages that are being delivered by the vice president. And Kelly, this is fascinating because this is now back-to-back days where we have seen VP Vance out on the road.
Yeah, very public settings, from Union Station, Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. And he went down to Georgia not just to sell that One Big Beautiful Bill, and he's trying to rebrand that after pushback on GOP lawmakers during this August recess, but the stop in the Peach State is really to do this pulse check ahead of the 2026 midterms. Take a listen.
Whatever he pretends to be in his television commercials, he doesn't give a damn about the 3rd district, and he doesn't give a damn about the people of Georgia, but we do, and we're going to fight for you every single day.
So it all comes back to elections, Blake. The all-important purple state of Georgia has a big Senate race coming up in 2026, and he mentioned there current Democratic junior senator Jon Ossoff, the focus of Republicans to keep control of the Senate. So Atlanta didn't exactly welcome Vance with open arms. It's a blue city that the two Democratic senators oppose the current administration there, but the surrounding suburbs have grown increasingly red in recent years. And Vance, he did make sure to give a shout out to Chick-fil-A while speaking there in Atlanta, where the company is based. So the stop really showcases how the Republican Party is trying to bring it back to the economy ahead of the midterms and testing out Vance's support ahead of the 2028 cycle. Blake.
I'm going to guess a shout out to Chick-fil-A is always a winner. Kelly Meyer, live for us there on the North Lawn tonight. Kelly, thank you. With us now tonight here on the Hill, he is the Democratic governor from the state of Hawaii. Back with us once again. Josh Green, always nice to see you, Governor. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
So there's a lot right now going on with your party, and I'll get into Gavin Newsom and Kathy Hochul in a second, two of your colleagues. But you just saw the vice president out on the road touting the bill, the key legislative bill for the president. He was yesterday at Union Station with the National Guard. President Trump was there moments ago as well, speaking to National Guard members. And as you sit back and think about it from your perch as a Democrat and a key Democrat, one of 23 Democratic governors, how do you view right now sort of the responsibility that you see in sort of pushing back but also keeping it in line?
Well, we have to take care of people in our country. And, you know, the big concern that a lot of people had, a lot of Americans, and about 2/3 of Americans were concerned about this, is spending too much of our safety net dollars on tax breaks. And so that has to be balanced and mitigated. But we still have to work on policy. I spent the better part of the morning working with CMS Director Oz this morning to make sure those rural healthcare dollars get into place. So you have to strike the balance. I don't particularly like seeing the vice president out campaigning during the workday. I think we should be working during the workday, and that's what Oz and I were doing. But on all these political issues, you see everyone teeing up big political questions in advance of the 26 and 28 elections. Looks like it's hand-to-hand combat.
I didn't expect you to tell me that you met with or spoke with Mehmet Oz today. I should note for our audience here on News Nation, or those listening to us on SiriusXM, you're a doctor by trade before you ever got into politics. What was that conversation about? What'd you tell him?
Well, we're working on the details, and this was a meeting with all of the governors across the country. They were all invited. A few of us were on that call, and it was about the rural health funds. I helped them put $50 billion into the president's bill, and that is $10 billion per year for 5 years to go towards significant health innovations as a bridge to the future. Now, I don't want to see Medicaid cuts. That's a strong position I have. I don't want to see cuts to vaccinations, strong position I have. But I do want to work wherever I can when there's some, solid thinking on policy. So we keep working. And that's the way America has to do its job. I don't like to see this kind of electoral arms race that's going on between Texas and California.
Okay.
Because that's just not good for us.
So, I was looking, obviously, this, but for our audience, there's 2 members of Congress from Hawaii. Jill Takuda won by 36 and Ed Case won by 43. So it's safe to say redistricting would do nothing where you are. But it is one of those things where, and I've said this, if you're forward in Texas, you got to be forward in California and vice versa. And as I just heard you say, you're not a fan of this. Do you think Gavin Newsom across the water there in California should be going forward with this?
Well, he's doing what he has to do. I support Gavin on this because he's being forced to do it by the Texas Initiative. And the way Gavin did it was thoughtful. He said, we only do this.
But isn't that, respectfully, Governor, isn't that kind of the contradiction there? That like, we shouldn't be doing this, but I respect how he's doing it?
No, because what happens is if you cede the ground, the government, the democracy will be gone. That would mean that you let one side of the aisle play with one rules, they amp up their numbers, and then it's all gone because it's all a numbers game in Washington, D.C. We governors work together. We're able to do that. In D.C., it's all about the numbers for the majority. And so you can't allow democracy to be undermined. So I would like to see them both back down. I'd like to see Texas, kill its plan, and then Gavin be able to stand down. It's unfortunate because this should never be happening.
I was listening to, you did an interview in Hawaii. I listened to part of it. It was at least published yesterday, in which you said, let's first show the post, actually, because Gavin Newsom's been trolling Donald Trump nonstop. For example, here was his press office with a sort of a mock Time magazine photo in which it shows Newsom as the king. But you were saying that people who are actually actively running for president are combative, and you described it as destructive. You didn't say Gavin Newsom by name, but you alluded to him there. Do you think the way, Governor Green, that Gavin Newsom is going about this sort of trolling Trump, fighting fire by fire, is, in your words, destructive?
Yeah, that wasn't aimed at Gavin at all. Really, it's aimed at anyone who's campaigning right now for 2028 elections. We just shouldn't be campaigning right now. We should be working. And that means that the vice president shouldn't be out on the campaign trail. And honestly, none of us should be. Let's get through 2026 and then have that election in front of us. But do our jobs, do them well, make our reputations so that people can see who we are. I really am frustrated, though, by this perpetual campaign process. And look, both parties are doing it. And I guess it's like, let's fight fire with fire. But I will bet you that the American people are going to choose someone that they feel lived up to their values going into 28. And I don't think it's going to be this arms race of electoral one-upsmanship.
What's the weather out there in Hawaii?
It never sucks.
He says it like it is. Governor Josh Green, the Democrat there from the state of Hawaii. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk again soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
Appreciate it. All right. Still to come tonight here on The Hill. The commander-in-chief from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to the streets of D.C., kind of, sort of. The president today with the National Guard. If you missed us at the top of the show, the former Vice President Mike Pence was with me. I asked him, do you support what your old boss is doing? We'll get into it on the other side.
Look how big the storm is.
A doomsday scenario.
Houses are gone. People have lost all their stuff. People here are suffering.
Decades later, the scars remain, and we remember.
The Hurricane Katrina tapes, Sunday at 8/7 Central on News Nation.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. Our studio, just a handful of stories above the streets of Washington, D.C. And it was on one of those streets, a little down the road, southeast part of the town moments ago, where that occurred. The President of the United States addressing the National Guard.
At the end of the day, Putin only understands strength. And I think the time has come for the United States Senate to pass those harsh secondary sanctions on Russia.
That obviously the Vice President Mike Pence, who joined me a little while ago. The president really dealing here with two different issues before him. In Washington, D.C., what he's doing with his crackdown on crime. And then overseas, the commander-in-chief trying to figure out how to end the war between Russia and Ukraine and set up a meeting potentially with himself, Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Zelensky. Full panel here with me now. Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration. Linda Tran, former senior advisor to the transportation secretary Pete Buttigieg. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. And Dan Cannonen, former battleground states director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. Happy Thursday. Almost to the end of the week. Remarkable scene just a little while ago. You had the president of the United States on the ground here in Washington, talking to the National Guard. Cue it up because I want the audience to see and hear it.
There's no games, right? We're not playing games. We're going to make it safe. And we're going to then go on to other places. But we're going to stay here for a while. We want to make this absolutely perfect. It's our capital.
So the president there, Bill, saying, or at least suggesting today, that this could go elsewhere. The question, I guess, is when might that occur and where else?
I think once he achieves his goals in Washington, D.C., he is going to look at crime-ridden cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, some of the others that have really suffered under the weight of these crimes. I think it's important to note that the president wasn't only saying that he wants to make those streets safe again. He wants to beautify the city, and he wants to make it prosperous. I think it's the nation's capital. It's the only federal jurisdiction that we have in the United States, which gives him the authority to do this. But equally important, these kids, these families, these small businesses in Washington, D.C. deserve these safe streets so that the businesses aren't locking up household items because of the retail theft, but so that people can go outside and actually engage in commerce and kids can have a safe neighborhood and get an education.
How much further do you think he goes here?
Well, I think he's laid it out, right? He's willing himself to take the streets. He showed that with his press conference just now. We don't know what the night holds for him is. But I think the story here is that you have 7 days without a homicide. That's huge for Washington, D.C. I work in D.C. I used to live here. We had to move our family out for fear of gun violence on the streets. And it's mostly the youths that should be in school or should be with their families. And I think that's where he turns next. And I think he does it hopefully in concert with some really great nonprofits that are in the city.
You think he goes to other cities?
I think he could.
You think he could?
I think he could. I think this is more a model of what could be done.
Okay.
Because in this case, he's actually telling the city to enforce the laws that are on the books. Other cities can make that choice, too. Other mayors can do that, too.
Here's why I bring it up, though. Roll Vice President Vance earlier today in Atlanta.
We have focused on Washington, D.C. because it's a federal city under our jurisdiction, but we certainly hope that whether it's Atlanta or anywhere else, people are going to look around and say, we don't have to live like this. Did you know armed robberies are down 55% in our nation's capital? It's amazing.
He was asked, Linda, about what could come next and didn't necessarily say we're going elsewhere. I don't know. I just wonder if this is D.C. only or if the administration does pursue other cities.
I think it's very difficult to assess what the president has done with the D.C. police situation, National Guard mobilization, et cetera, without taking into context the moment he chose to do it and the actual data that we see here in D.C. You know this, Blake, that the crime rate has actually been down over the last couple of years steadily. Nobody's saying that there shouldn't be.
It's up and down.
Well, nobody's saying that there shouldn't be more done to make sure that crime rates are low in D.C. or in any other city around the country. But it just so happens he decided to do that at the height of controversy around the Epstein files, at the height of people's concerns around rising prices, continual inflation, and groceries. I mean, you have to take it all into context.
Look, if people haven't died all week, that seems like a good thing to me.
I want to share a little bit of the cynicism here. I think a safe D.C. and a safe city and any part of this country is laudable and we should be going after. But I'm a homeowner and been a renter in this city since 2010. The entire time in the city. I've lived on a street that in 1 year saw 32 new restaurants open up in 2012 to 2013. And now I see tanks and heavily armored folks walking down those streets as a spectacle. And I think Linda's right. A lot of this is about distraction from bad policies and unpopular policies. And I want to point out a couple points of this. In Ohio, where Mike DeWine acquiesced and sent down a couple hundred National Guard members to Washington, D.C., there are 3 cities in Ohio with a higher murder rate and a higher violent crime rate than Washington, D.C. It's not about making cities safer. It's about the spectacle. It's about what he's doing today to get us talking about that. And I've thought all along, as these bills are unpopular, and as he would have a hard time getting inflation under control and getting the economy back on track, the thing he can do is look tough on crime and immigration, and he will keep doing stuff that gets our attention to distract from those other issues.
The other thing,
Blake, can I jump in and make a point, though, on the data? There are active investigations into the Metropolitan Police Department about the manipulation of data, that the political leadership of the department and the city were instructing line officers to misclassify violent events, not as crimes, but as injured persons who were taken. And there's a federal investigation into it, but there was an existing suspension of somebody in one of the wards over that allegation. So every time somebody says, well, the crime rate is down, we can't trust the data right now. The people of Washington, D.C., and the people of the United States who pay for Washington, D.C. in part, deserve the truth about what that data says.
I had Vice President Mike Pence on the show earlier tonight, as you know, and spoke with him as well about the other big story for President Trump, which is what's going to happen with Putin and Zelensky, Trump, Putin and Zelensky. The vice president saying to me, former vice president, at the end of the day, Putin only understands strength. He thinks secondary sanctions on Russia need to come next. It's the other thing, Linda, before the president tonight. Where do you think this unfolds next?
Well, first of all, I thought it was fascinating, the recommendation that the former vice president made about going ahead and moving forward with these sanctions, having him sign it, and then he could then back off of it using his presidential authority if he wanted to do so. I think that if Vice President Pence, who has dealt with Donald Trump and dealt with all these foreign leaders, thinks that where we're going here is more violence and we're not looking towards peace coming out of Russia, then that's a real warning flag for everybody.
I was going to say, I watched the interview earlier. I thought it was great, by the way.
Oh, I'll take great. Thank you, Dan.
It was very great.
Thank you.
And I think that the thing that struck me about it was the vice president was clearly trying to position a path for Donald Trump to take. You know, lauding him on the recent comments, lauding him on getting a little tougher and sharpening the rhetoric on Putin and Russia. And I've been critical of the president for not doing that up until this point. And laying out for him a case that you should do this on the merits and on the politics. And I just wonder, and I do not know the answer to this question, whether the president sees that as a good case politically for him when Bannon and MAGA want him to get out of that world.
So the president hasn't actually said he's not interested in sanctions. They're very much still on the table. What I think is an interesting play here is if the Senate were to pass it and put it on the president's desk, then he could actually use that as more leverage in the peace negotiations to bring Putin and Zelensky to the table together. That's step one, right? The other step is actually signing the sanctions and secondary sanctions and having those in place behind the scenes for Putin. So there's a couple plays that he could do here. I think the ultimate goal is using American taxpayer dollars correctly, which he is committed to, and providing peace through strength, which everybody saw the images coming out of the White House this last 3 days where you had all those foreign leaders staring up at the president. That is not an image we saw 2 years ago.
You used to be in the room with Trump and Pence. What did you make of what you heard there from Pence?
I think, well, number one, Donald Trump and Michael Pence have at times diverged on the issue of Ukraine. And what we talked about earlier, Dan and I were watching it, I found it very interesting that Vice President Pence was actually applauding the peace efforts of the president. And I think what that tells you is that the establishment and a lot of people who are not necessarily MAGA who want peace in this conflict are supporting what the president is doing. And they also recognize that Donald Trump's probably the only one who could bring Europe to the table, who could bring Putin to the table, and Zelensky.
Can I make a point about the
really quick?
That European leaders meeting? I took a different take on that. That was, I thought, all of Europe and Zelensky's gentle parenting Trump into a better posture. That's what I saw.
That was peace through strength at its finest.
I think there's clearly some sort of a cadence here of meet with Putin, meet with Zelensky, meet with the European leaders, then try to get him in a room. I don't know how all of this ends up. We'll all watch.
Let's hope.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Still to come, other side of the break. I told you earlier this week we would know a lot more in 48 hours. Well, 48 hours has come. I'll explain on the other side of the break and what it means for your wallet. Those stores right here. Coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she'll be speaking live with the Los Angeles District Attorney. The very latest with the Menendez brothers. That's 7 minutes away. My take and what's trending. Other side of the break. All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on your day, here's some of what's trending right now on thehill.com. A win for the president today. A court in New York tossed out a nearly $500 million fine against him. Staying in the Big Apple here, a former top aide to the mayor there, charged in bribery schemes. That's a big story there in New York. And then they're getting a lot of grief from this one. Cracker Barrel rebrands logo after 48 years. For more of those stories and what's trending and what's happening on The Hill, all you have to do, download the QR code on your screen or head on over to thehill.com. All right, I told you on Tuesday night that the next 48 hours would tell an interesting story, whatever it might be, about the top topic for many families, prices. And here's why. For the biggest big box retailers, Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, and Walmart all reported earnings, and a theme wove throughout: tariffs and prices. Walmart's CEO acknowledging today that some prices have gone up for consumers, saying, quote, "We've continued to see our costs increase each week, and that will continue into the third and fourth quarters." Target saying prices are rising as a last resort. And then the two major home improvement stores saying as well that some prices are going up. And here's why I bring it up. The top two stories for the most part today in this town involve the president trying to figure out that situation. And then, of course, he went on down and spoke to the National Guard troops here in Washington, D.C. at what point in time as well. But the CEOs today of the largest companies made it very clear prices are still very much front and center. It was that way in 2024, and you have to think it'll be that way heading into 2026 as well. I thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. Have a good one.